Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start my presentation off by firstly thanking the Vice-Chancellor and Professor Kirkpatrick for inviting me to speak and for running this event, which I hope will be an annual event. I wanted to start my presentation by just pointing out that I've actually made a slight change to the title here. What I'll be talking about is how online technology and inquiry-based learning is being used in my course to enhance student engagement. A little bit of background first. I coordinate a course called Human Biology 1A, which is a Semester 1, Year 1 compulsory course in the Bachelor of Health Sciences program. There are about 400 students in the course, and it's a basic introduction to anatomy and physiology. I thought I would start my presentation off by saying that I really love teaching. And I'm sure you all do, that's why you're here today. I especially love teaching first-year students. I know it can be really challenging dealing with large numbers of diverse students, but I also think it's really exciting and really rewarding as well. Having said that, I really also love Swap Week because for me it's an opportunity, and probably for you as well, to sit back and to relax and breathe and think about all of the things that you've done during the semester. All of the tweaks, all of the changes that maybe you've made, and it's an opportunity to think about which of those changes has worked and which of those changes maybe hasn't worked. For me, this is also a great time to think about the challenges that I've encountered and how I might address these challenges in Semester 2. I don't know about you, but for me, one of the big challenges is getting students to actually attend lectures. In human biology, pretty much every student shows up in week 1, but by about week 5 or 6, only about a third of students regularly show up to class. Now, last year I actually surveyed students in my course and asked those students who don't show up why they don't show up. This is what I found. By far the most popular answer was, well, I just choose to view recorded lectures in my own time. Which I suppose is fair enough. I mean, lecture attendance isn't compulsory. We record lectures via my media. You know, students have busy lives. But I've always assumed that students who don't attend lectures actually view recorded lectures maybe that week of the lecture, the next day, that week. But what I've actually found is that many of these students don't view lectures immediately after the lecture is given. A lot of them are actually waiting 2, 3, even 4 weeks sometimes before they view a lecture. And this is actually a really big problem because if they don't have that lecture content, they can't participate in tutorials and engage in laboratory sessions. Now, some of you are probably wondering, how do you know that students are waiting 2, 3, 4 weeks to attend lectures? I know because every year something really interesting happens in my course, and it involves diets. So let me just explain here. In my course, I give a lecture on metabolism and nutrition, and as part of that lecture we talk about different diets. Now, I've been on diets my entire life, so I have a lot of experience in this area, and to prove it, I show students this slide. These are photos of me. This is my student ID photo when I started uni in 1994, so year 1. This is me 10 years later, so this is what happens if you eat whatever you want and don't exercise for a decade. And this is obviously me now. What I basically do is say to students after this lecture, look, if you're interested in finding out how I lost this weight, because I always run out of time at this lecture, come and see me and I'll gladly, share my story with you. And a lot of students do that. So I get a lot of students coming to see me immediately after the lecture or the week of the lecture. A week after the lecture, a few students, 2 weeks after the lecture, a few students, and then surprise, surprise, about 3 to 4 weeks after, the lecture is given, I start getting lots of queries from students asking, how did you lose that weight? When I ask students why they've waited so long to come and see me, they almost always say the same thing: I just got around to viewing your lectures. So this year in human biology, I decided to tackle these two challenges that are related in the following ways. I decided to incorporate more inquiry-based learning activities into my face-to-face lectures. Students formed groups, were given questions, challenges, problems, scenarios, and I hope that this would encourage students to attend lectures and also test their knowledge and improve their research skills. With regards to the online material, I've replaced some of my recorded 50-minute lectures with short interactive modules which students can view in their own time, either prior to a lecture or after the lecture. And these are kind of more engaging and user-friendly compared to a narrated PowerPoint. So let's start on those interactive modules first. I've been using in my course Articulate Storyline to create these interactive modules, mainly because it outputs to HTML5 and iOS, so it's compatible with mobile devices, unlike Articulate Studio, which outputs to Flash. This is just an example, a recording off of my iPad, just showing you one of these presentations. So when students start, they're asked to type their name in. The software remembers their name, so it's kind of personalised. Students are presented, this particular presentation was on functions of the skeleton, so just one concept. So very short, 15-minute presentation that they can kind of do on the bus or train on the way in. Students could basically tap on any of those functions and find out more information. I won't go through the whole thing. There were also 3 questions at the end, so students could test their knowledge. If they get a question right, like this student's about to, I'm very happy, which is great. Give them a thumbs up. If they get a question wrong, then I'm not so happy, and you'll see that in a minute. No. So that's an example of some of this interactive stuff that we're doing online. What about in our inquiry-based lectures? Well, just a couple of weeks ago, I gave one of these lectures on male reproductive system. So these are some of the things that I did in that lecture. I asked students, could skinny jeans affect male fertility? They're very popular genes. Students were given papers, had to review the effects of different clothing and also different physical activities, the effects of that on testis temperature and why testis temperature is even important for fertility. I asked students what animal has the biggest testes. This was really important because it led to a discussion on sperm competition theory. We reviewed testicular cancer by discussing Lance Armstrong's story, although this year they all wanted to know if his doping actually was responsible for the cancer in the first place, which is good. And finally, I asked students why testes would be located in an external environment, such a vulnerable place. I tried to convince them it was to keep Australia's funniest home video show on air, but they're much smarter than me and didn't buy that one. Student feedback has been really positive. I recently got this comment from a student: Mario knows more about testes than anyone I know, but not in a weird way. One of my colleagues, Dr. Rachel Gibson, is doing something very similar in nursing this year, so we're kind of working together. This is her activity, her online activity in Storyline, looking at cell structure function. In her face-to-face classes, she's asking students to create a cell or design a cell based on a particular function that she's given out. So this is just photos of that in action. Have these worked? These approaches worked? Well, lecture attendance has improved. So in human biology, it's gone from about 30% to about 50% when I run one of these inquiry-based lectures. You might think that's not much, but these lectures happened kind of middle of the semester when students have already kind of established a habit of whether or not they're going to show up. So getting even 50% of them to show up was good. But in nursing, it skyrocketed from 30 to 80%. More students are viewing online material at the time of the lecture or just after, as opposed to 3, 4, 5 weeks later. In nursing, more than 80% are viewing the online material before the lecture, which is just phenomenal. In human biology, this is happening. This is kind of also happening, but I can show you this in a nice way with these two graphs. This was that diet lecture last year when students accessed it online. You can see the day of the lecture in red there. And you can see that, 3, 4 weeks later, students are actually viewing the material online, and that's why they're asking me, a month later, how I lost the weight. This year, with that interactive presentation on the skeleton, this was the day of the lecture, and you can see that actually students have accessed the material on the day or just after. It's also improving student understanding. Nursing students this year got 84% on a test on the cell, which is just unheard of, and also student satisfaction. These are some comments which I don't have time to read out, but they really enjoyed the online activities and the interactive face-to-face discussions. I've also taken this inquiry-based approach and moved it into labs this semester. So this year I ran an amazing race, Human Biology Edition. I love this show, so I had to find a way of incorporating it into the course. Students were given challenges, questions, problems. They had to work in small groups to basically race around the human body. There were puzzles and things. These are some photos of students in action. They really enjoyed this activity. I sadly couldn't give them $1 million, but I could give them some chocolate gold coins, which they seemed to still appreciate. And I also had some really fantastic feedback from students about this. So to summarise, it's early days yet because we're just kind of trialling it this year with the hope of implementing it a lot more next year. But our observations suggest that these approaches are improving student engagement, satisfaction and knowledge at first year, and we're thrilled that what we're doing appears to align with the beacon of enlightenment and thus the VC's vision of learning and teaching at the uni. Thank you.